Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I'm joined with Jarod Lewis. He is the manager of the costume shop at New York City Ballet. I'm so excited to have Jarod on today. I had the pleasure of meeting him in person several weeks ago when I got to tour the costume shop with a group of seamstresses, tutu makers. I thank them for inviting me along. And I had such a great day and just fascinating conversation that I felt like I just touched the surface going there that day, that I wanted to have Jarod come on the podcast and talk about what he does and behind the scenes there at New York City Ballet. So welcome, Jarod, to Dance Talk.
Hi, Joanne. It's nice to join you on your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I am fascinated by what you do. I find it so interesting. While I sew, I'm not a seamstress for tutus. I haven't sewn in a long time, but I do know how to sew. I had a dance studio for 23 years. I loved picking the costumes for my students. I love fabric. No, I don't know if you could tell that day. I was like,
You were really wanting to touch everything.
Could you tell? I really, really did. And, we'll get into that part of it. But I just love textiles and fabric and notions and all the things that go into the making of costumes, because it's such an art form. Can you talk about, before we dive into the art form and what you do, can you give us a little background about yourself and how you actually got into being the manager there, and what that trajectory was for you as a professional?
Yeah. So my story is a little different than most people who get into these types of fields. A lot of times they go to school for fashion or costuming or design, but for me, it was very different. So I'm originally from Eastern Kentucky, and I grew up in a small farming community. My hometown today maybe has about 80 people in it. Yeah. My high school growing up was about 20 miles away. And being in Eastern Kentucky and in Appalachia, there's not really a lot of arts that thrive there. I think the closest movie theater to my parents is about 35 to 40 miles away. And so I did not grow up with all of this. It still blows my mind coming into work some days, like, wow, this is what I'm doing. But originally I went to school. I have a bachelor's degree in music. And I'm a percussionist by trade. And I also studied TV and radio communications while I was in school. So my goal was to be either an orchestral percussionist or work as an audio engineer. And what happened was I saw a Cirque du Soleil show when I was younger. And so every decision has really been made to get me to Cirque du Soleil or an equivalency at some point. I didn't care if I was on stage, backstage, or if I was even a custodian, as long as I was at that type of entity as a company. Well, I finished my music degree. I went and performed as a musician for a while. Working as an audio engineer, I worked with different music groups called drum corps. So they're in an entity called DCI, Drum Corps International. And I was the audio engineer for the Santa Clara Vanguard's Cadet Corps based out of San Jose, California. And then I worked with the Cavaliers based out of Chicago. And those were summer tours. So in about 3 to 4 months, we'd travel about 20 states.
Wow.
And I did that while in school. And then after finishing for a bit, then I decided, okay, I want to go get a master's degree. That way, one day, if I wanted to be a professor, I'd have it done. I didn't have to worry about it later in life. So I went and I was working on a master's degree that focused in audio production and commercial composition. Well, a year into my master's degree, the university had to make the tough decision to actually dissolve my master's program.
Oh,
So
wow.
1 year in, and then it went away. good news is that there's a new version of that master's degree that's now available that's actually a lot better than the one I was trying to get. So I'm happy for the new students.
Yes,
It's
yes.
unfortunate that I didn't
Uh-huh.
do it. Um, but then I switched over to the theater department to study sound design. Well, the
Okay.
professors made the decision that I had never studied theater. I'd never been a part of it. So if I was going to do this, I needed to take at least one class in every aspect of theater. So I didn't have to take the audio class for
Uh-huh.
obvious reasons. But then I took lighting, script analysis, directing, acting. I had to take, one of every single class. Well, that first semester, the first class I ended up taking was Intro to Sewing Techniques. And I thought, great, I'm going to learn how to hem my pants. I'm going to, learn these basic skills, and then I'll never do it
Uh-huh.
again. That was at 26.
Wow.
And so in that class, that was the first time I'd really touched a sewing needle.
Uh-huh.
And my mom was actually our little town. You could almost think like the town's little seamstress. She would
Oh,
make
okay.
dresses for girls in the town. She would fix things. She would hem my pants.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted nothing to do with that. And I didn't find out till after I really got into sewing, taking these classes, that her mom was a quilt maker, and then her grandmother, my great grandmother, was a dressmaker during the Great Depression.
Wow. I love
Yeah,
stories like this. I love that.
and so it was really great getting to see that this unknown lineage I had was getting passed down to me. My
Uh-huh.
dad is a carpenter and also a pipe welder, so he taught me how to take materials and build it. And
Uh-huh.
as a musician and audio engineer, I knew how to figure out mathematics.
Uh-huh.
With this intro to sewing class, I realized there was so much more to sewing than I could have ever realized.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I had really great professors, and one of them, uh, she was such a good professor that if you were not a costuming student, she would try to help you understand what you were doing based off of what you were going to school for. So I was
Oh,
audio,
wow.
and she was like,
Mhm.
okay, like your audio, your sewing, like you're just learning the basics right now, but a lot of it does translate. And that's
Mhm.
when I was introduced to pattern making. And so much of that is taking the three-dimensional body. You
Mhm.
have the two-dimensional rendering, which
Mhm.
is the technical name for the drawing the designer
Mhm.
makes. And then from the measurements of the body, I can now start perceiving those measurements as 2D and 3D. Just the same way with audio engineering, I
Mhm.
had to think of it as a focal point, going
Mhm.
out into the room, all the acoustics, coming back to the microphone, and then going through the sound system and controlling all of that. So it's
Wow.
amazing how much audio engineering
Mhm.
and pattern making really do
That's
cross those
amazing.
boundaries. Yeah.
That's
And
really
so,
cool.
and even to this day, a lot of times, like when I'm touching fabric or I like trying to feel it and understand it, a lot of times I will interpret in my head as sound versus just a textile. Being like, okay, it's moving this way, it's flowing this
Mhm.
way, the fabric is breathing just the
Mhm.
way sound moves. And so that's how I think of it in my head. And so
That's
even
fascinating.
sewing needles, I'm going like, okay, well, the fabric is woven like this. I really need to be doing the stitching this way. That way it flows with it and the needle flows through the fabric.
See, I mean, when you say that, because I have an understanding of sewing and fabric and whatnot, for you to explain it like that makes so much sense. And then
Mhm.
I think it adds such a nice understanding of what you're doing when you're creating costumes.
Yeah.
And I mean, anything, but we're particularly talking about costumes because you're in the costume shop.
Mhm.
But what I love about that is that, I'm visualizing it with you, because
Yes.
so often choreographers will come in, dancers will come in, and those elements that you're talking about are so important when you're choosing
Mhm.
fabric, when you're sewing, create how it is going to be sewed, how it's going to lay, how it's going to move, how it's going to look under all those things. So it's amazing. It shows everybody, and I say this for the listeners, it shows that all the skills that you attain to whatever point you are in your life. I'm saying this specifically for the listeners, whoever you are out there listening right now, that whatever you're doing, everything you've done up to this moment in your life is leading you somewhere. It's leading you to where you are, right? And it's leading you to somewhere. And all those skills you've gathered along the way, filter into what you're doing. It's like sitting in math class and when people say, "Oh, I'm never going to need to do this. So I'm never going to need this." But you do.
Exactly.
It shows
Yeah.
up somewhere. I still use like the A equals B equals C whenever I'm doing
Oh, yeah.
stuff. I use that all the time. But please continue telling us all about all this. Is fascinating. I love it.
So I ended up doing 3 semesters at school studying. So backtrack a little bit. After that first semester of taking this class, I realized how much I really wanted to do it. And so I told my professors, I think I want to give up audio engineering and I want to go into costuming. And they're like, "You're crazy. You're just burnt out. Your master's degree was dissolved. Like you're just in a different space right now and you're comfortable." I went, "Well, that is part of it." Um, and they said, "Okay, if you really want to do this, you got to prove it to us. Find an internship over the summer and work in costumes to know, like, do you actually want to be doing this?" I'm like, "That's a really smart thing."
Yeah.
So I found a wardrobe internship up here at the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival in Cold Spring, and I was ended up getting that internship for the summer, which was great because it was an outdoor theater and it was wardrobe. So I wasn't making the outfits, but I had to learn how to maintain them. I had to learn how to clean them. I had to learn why certain outfits had zippers versus hooks and bars versus snaps, actually how they function. And really, when I talk to younger costume makers, I tell them all the time, you need to go learn wardrobe as you're learning these basic skills of making, because sometimes, especially with what we do here, wardrobe will sometimes say like, "Hey, we need this one to be a zipper or we need this one to be a hook and a bar," because what we're doing is to help them with their job.
Yes.
And so it's so crucial, this communication between wardrobe and costume, which also then becomes a communication with the designers. The 3 real aspects of costuming in the professional world. So I ended up doing that. I loved it. And I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. And my professors went, "Okay, you actually want to do this." And so then they tasked me that semester back at school. You have to make, well, I ended up doing a private, sort of like private lessons. It was an independent study on pattern making. So I could start visualizing the 2D into 3D. And my first project was, okay, you have to make the main dress for the first show for this coming season at school. I'm like, "Well, I've never done this before. What do I do?" And they go, "That's your first assignment for your class." So I had 4 weeks to go from I've never done this before to I had to make a sort of Victorian gown. And my professors really helped me step by step through the way. And it also helped that the designer was one of the costume students. And so we both were learning this along the way, communicating with each other. From her original rendering to how it ended up, a lot of things had to be changed. And so I wasn't just blindsided working with a professional and they're expecting all this stuff. It's you and the designer are both learning. So that was a really great way to start. Ended up doing that. I did another semester where I convinced enough students to let the school create a wig and millinery class. So millinery is hat making. So I think it was 12 of us learned how to make hats for half the semester. And the other half of the semester was learning how to hand ventilate, making wigs and mustaches and facial pieces. Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. Keep going.
And
Keep
so,
going.
yeah, I realized because my master's degree was dissolved, this was just another undergraduate studies. I was done with school. I'm like, okay, I need to be out in the real world. Also, I really want to be doing this. And so I ended up booking 2 internships back to back. One was about 3 to 4 months long in Utah, working at the Utah Festival Opera and Musical Theater in Logan, Utah. There I was a stitcher and I worked on 4 of the 6 operas we built in 6 weeks. And then I had to work wardrobe for 3 of them. And then once that ended, I immediately moved to Little Rock, Arkansas for a year, where I was the assistant to the costume shop for the Arkansas Repertory Theater. And in that position for that year, I was working with the shop manager, helping with just day-to-day things, working with our draper, and the draper is the pattern maker, working with our wardrobe supervisor. And also I was in charge of maintaining all of the inventory and the storage, it was an entire top part of the building. And so they had outfits that had been gifted to them dating from the 1800s all the way to today. And so it was my job to inventory, itemize, repair, do all of that. And it was such a great learning place to see every aspect of what could actually go into a costume shop.
Yeah.
That internship ended, and then I realized, okay, I'm done with educational parts. I have this other background. I'm also, I was turning 28 at the time. I'm like, I need a real job. I need to start actually making income instead of just scraping by. And so I reached out to the two of the main designers I worked with at the opera. Because one of them, I was the main stitcher. Even though I was an intern there, I ended up being the head stitcher on her opera. And the other one, where her workstation was, I was sewing right beside her. So I became we became very close that summer. Reached out to both of them. I said, okay, like, what am I going to be doing with my life? I love making, but I also realized I actually don't, and this is controversial, I don't care what happens on the stage.
That's okay.
With the actors, with the dancers. That's not why I'm doing this art form. I want to be making. I want to take all these skills, all the mathematics, the creating part, and I want to turn that into a career. And I also realized the little bit of dancewear I got to make, that's what really fascinated me. Where can I work that has that? Well, they both told me that there's
why did that fascinate you? What was it about that fascinated you, making the dancewear portion?
Dancers are a very different breed of performers in the sense that opera, whenever you're making an outfit for a opera singer, the main part of it mathematically that's hard to do is the diaphragm. So you have to make sure that everything here is loose. This is the part that's moving. Everything else has to be structured. And then below it is whatever the designer wants. There's not much movement with it, so there's a lot of math with it, but it's not as much as other things could be. Straight theater and musicals, the most things you're doing challenge-wise with the musical is making sure that the gussets and everything is here so that they can actually move. And, if they do a somersault, they can do that.
Sure, yeah.
But everything's still basically just normal clothing. Then there's dancers, where you have to take normal clothing and make it in a way that they're doing acrobatic movements on stage. You're taking these very lightweight fabrics and making it look like as they move, it's magic is happening. And the math and physics and the chemistry, the aerodynamics, everything that goes into that has fascinated me so much. Especially in school, I loved working on the dance shows for that year and a half I was in the costume shop, because not only that part, but the structure of ballet bodices and corsets, you're making this beautiful outfit, but it's so structured and engineered, but yet it's so lightweight.
Yeah.
And so these are the things that fascinated me.
Yeah. I'm sorry, can I say this while you're just what's coming to mind while you're talking, because I love how impassioned you are about it, because I visualize it when you're talking about it. I'm thinking, I have this great idea for you. I just think it would be so cool, to do and maybe you've done this or you've thought about doing this or what have you, or maybe I should tell you off camera. I'll tell you off camera. How's that?
Okay.
I'll tell you off camera. Remind me to tell you. Continue, because I'm fascinated, Jarod. I just love this. Keep going.
So I contacted the two designers because I really looked up to them. And I had remembered one of them mentioning, once you get done with this, you're really talented. And whenever you're in the early stage of learning something, it's really hard to tell, am I good at this? Or am I just struggling by? or am I actually succeeding at this?
Mhm.
Because all you know is what you're learning, and all
Mhm.
you know is the people that you're surrounded by. I realized throughout my journey getting to where I am now that each step of the way, I didn't realize at the time that I was surrounded by some of the best people I could that would push me, because
Mhm.
they were some of the best in their parts of their industry.
Mhm.
To me at the time, it's just like, this is the designer, not
Mhm.
realizing that they had won all these awards and all these
Yeah.
things. Um, so these two designers said, okay, there's a guy in Chicago. His name's Travis Halsey. You need to go work for him. He had two assistants who they're both getting married. One's moving to North Dakota and one is
Mhm.
moving to London. So he needs someone. And he needs someone who is skilled in a lot of different ways because
Mhm.
while he does specialize in dancewear, he makes a lot of different stuff.
Mhm.
It was hard for them to describe what it is he really does. They said he also uses a lot of technology in making the costumes. And so I looked him
Guess what?
up, looked up all this, everything he was doing. And when I applied to him, I didn't just send like a cover letter and a resume. They said, because of my background, especially because of growing up on a farm, they said, that's going to be really important for this. I'm like, okay, like who cares that I grew up on a farm? Well, Travis did because he grew up on a farm in South Dakota. And he came from there, from a very small community, and made his way to eventually being one of the drapers for the Houston Ballet, and then became the lead draper for the
Wow.
Joffrey Ballet, where he even designed some of the Joffrey Ballet stuff. And then he just got tired of working for other people and for these institutions. He goes, I just want to make my own company because I just
Wow.
want to make things. And
Wow.
so that's what he was doing. He was really wanting to become, this is a very important name in the history of dancewear. He
Mhm.
wanted to be the next Karinska or the next Matera,
Mhm.
or, you know, he wanted a company that would be like today's Eric Winterlings.
Mhm.
And so that's what he was striving to do. And he was doing it. He was succeeding at that. And so I sent him this letter explaining, I grew up on a farm. I've been a musician and an audio engineer, got into costuming. I've been told you're the person who can teach me, help me grow, and get me to that next step. And he immediately called me. We had an interview, and he said, okay, here's the situation. You'll have to move to Chicago, and I'm going to give you a 1 month trial period because
Mhm.
if you are going to be my assistant,
Mhm.
um, because being his assistant wasn't just, going to get coffee and everything.
Right, right. Mhm.
It would be, I'd be helping him design. I'd be working
Sure.
on every outfit that he designed. And anywhere he travels, I would be traveling with him.
Mhm.
And so he said, you need a month to figure out if I feel like you're capable of working with me, but also
Mhm.
if you like working for me,
See, that was
which
nice.
was,
I think that was really
yes,
insightful of him. Yeah, yeah. Good for him.
it is such a crucial part of it. I now
Mhm.
know because he was very upfront. He said, in this position, you will be around me more than my husband. So you will know every aspect of my life.
Yeah,
I'm going to know every aspect of your life. Every time, if I go somewhere, you are right there with me.
yeah.
I'm like, okay. And so he told me to take a month. The first project we worked on when I
Sure.
got there, we're making, I think it was 20, maybe 25 light up outfits for SeaWorld
Oh
in
my
San
gosh.
Antonio. Yeah,
Wow.
that was the first project. And it was, okay, like, here's all this stuff. We have to make this. We have a deadline of a month, which is why he said a month.
Mhm.
And then I'll know and you know. It was 2 days later. He said, you need to find a permanent place to live because I want to hire you as my full-time assistant.
Wow. Wow. What a
So
compliment to you. Mhm.
yeah. Um, so I ended up working with him just shy of 3 years. By the end of it, I was the manager of the shop. But because of COVID, every theater in the world had shut down. We were losing clients everywhere just because no one was
Yeah.
doing shows.
Yep. Yep.
And Travis, unfortunately, was diagnosed with 2 types of stage 4 cancer.
Oh
And then
my
he
goodness.
passed within less than 9 months.
Oh, I'm sorry
So
to
we
hear
had to
that.
close the it was very sad. I can now talk about it and not
Yeah.
cry. Because when you're that close to someone,
Yes.
it's really challenging. Especially because Travis taught me literally everything I know about tutu
Mhm.
making. Because
Wow.
that's what he specialized in.
Wow.
So Travis passed away. We closed Halsey on stage, and COVID was happening. A year into COVID, one of my friends, Catherine Zur, who knew Travis very intimately. Catherine is the costume designer for Ballet with a Twist. So she also
Uh-huh.
knows a lot about ballet and tutu making. She had visited us once before Travis ever got sick. And she saw me, and one day Travis handed me the pattern because she spent the whole day hanging out with us.
Uh-huh.
And in that day, I took the pattern and I made an entire outfit in about 8
Wow.
hours.
Wow.
And to me, that was normal.
Yeah.
Going back to, I was
Mhm.
always surrounded by
Mhm.
people who were better than me. So they kept setting what I thought was
Mhm.
just
That's the standard.
normal.
Mhm.
I thought this is what everyone could do.
Mhm.
I now know that's not what everyone
Not
can
the
do.
case. Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting. I feel like I used to love watching. I'm sorry if you didn't, but I loved watching Project Runway. Did you watch Project Runway?
Uh, no.
Anyway, I just loved watching them work and just rooting and
Mm,
just seeing, just that whole thing happening of them creating and all that sort of
yeah.
stuff. But anyway, go ahead.
And so a year into COVID, Catherine gave me a call. And before I can even say hello, she's going, Jarod, what are you doing with your life? You haven't posted anything on Facebook, on Instagram. I haven't heard from you. What are you doing? And I was honest. I said, literally right now, I'm filling out a form to work at the Target a couple blocks away from me.
Mhm.
And she goes, throw it away.
Wow.
What's your resume look like? Do you have a portfolio? Do you have a website? Like she keeps saying all this stuff, but she's not saying why. I
Yeah.
eventually beat it out of her as to why. And she goes, I can't tell you how I know this, but
Mhm.
in, let's see, March, April, May, June, July, in 4 months' time, New York City Ballet will be reopening. And they need people in their shop because people have left for other jobs because
Mhm.
COVID. Luckily, no one passed away, but
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
took other positions to
Sure.
survive. And I'm going, okay, let me figure this out. Updated everything, built an entire website. And then uh, the job opening showed up June 1st. I waited till June 3rd because I didn't want to be I didn't need to show that I knew this. And I applied.
Was that in what
Uh,
was that 21? Was that when was that? In 21 or 22? Which year was that? Of the pandemic?
20,
21?
that would have been 21 because it was a
Right.
year into
Hey,
the
yeah.
pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that point, I hadn't sewn anything
Wow.
because every time I'd looked at a sewing machine during that time, I would break down and cry because
Yeah, of
of
course.
everything that happened. Well, email it to Mark Capel, the director of costumes, and same thing to Travis. I also sent a letter with it, not just a cover letter, but really explaining things.
Yeah.
Mark's like, okay, what's going on? Um, we talked, and in that first conversation, he goes, in my 40 years, I've never had someone just apply blankly to work in a shop. You didn't tell me what position you want to be in. You didn't tell me all these things, but you clearly want to work here. Tell me
Mhm.
more. And so we talked about how I clearly know how to make tutus. I know how to make
Mhm.
dancewear, but I'd love to actually be a full-time draper one day. And then
Mm.
eventually I'd love to be a shop manager. And then one day I would love to be in a type of position like Mark is in.
Mhm.
And,
And
we
so
were talking about this.
Mark was the man. He was there that day, right? Mark was the man who was very busy, and right when we came
Yeah,
that
he
day,
was working
he was
on his
very
own
busy.
project.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
okay. Yeah.
Um, and so we talked about it, and more after I think it was 3 initial interviews, we decided, okay, I'm going to hire you as a full-time stitcher, a part-time cutter, and then in a year's time, maybe 2 years' time, depending on if the position opens up, I'd like you to step up to be the assistant draper. Do that for a few years, and then if the draper position opens up, when it does, then step up to that position. So we
Wow.
had all these years planned out.
Yeah. Now
And
take a moment just briefly to explain to listeners each of those positions, the stitcher, the pattern,
Okay.
all those different, just briefly, so people who may not know what goes into all the costume making, what that is.
So in our shop specifically, we have you can think of it different hierarchies of positions within the shop. Not that one is better than the other, but it's skill and production wise of how it happens. So we have the stitchers, though that's the theatrical term for someone who sews. So in the dressmaking community, it would be seamstress. In theater, it's a stitcher because you're going to be sewing a lot of different types of things. Then we have our fabric cutter. Her full-time job is to cut fabric. While it seems like a simple job, it is actually very highly skilled. You have to know how to cut stretch wear, furs, velvets, chiffons, everything. And they each take sometimes different techniques. Then we have our draper. The draper is the pattern maker in the theatrical world. And for us, draping technically is when you have the mannequin and you're actually draping the fabric on it to build a garment. You take that off and make the pattern. We don't have time for that. So our drapers actually have to be skilled enough to where it's just the measurement sheet, the picture, and you just start drawing the pattern. And that's called flat patterning.
Wow.
So we have our men's draper and our women's draper. Then we have our assistant draper, who is their assistant, but also can do their job. And then we have our shopper. That is their job, is to shop, which is the most stressful job in the shop. And we'll touch on that later.
I saw those binders.
Then we have our fabric dyer and painter. She dyes and paints all the fabric. And then we have the shop manager and then the director of costumes. So that's in the costume shop. Then in the other 4 departments, because it's a 5 sub-department department, we have our men and women's wardrobe departments. They're actually the people backstage doing laundry, doing repairs, and dressing the dancers. So we don't work during the shows. They're the ones working there. They're actually getting ready to go to Copenhagen right now.
Yes, I know.
And so we're here preparing for the fall season. They're preparing for the last tour of the summer. So we have our wardrobe supervisors. They each have an assistant supervisor. They each have their own set of 1 to 3 stitchers. And then they have dressers. The dressers their job is to dress the performers. They're not doing repair work. They might do laundry, but that is their job, is to dress. Then we have our shoe manager. He's in charge of all of our shoes. We have anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000 pairs of shoes in house that he's in charge of. Then we have our shoe painter dyer. So all the outfits, the shoes have to match. So that's his job to paint all of that. And then we have our hair and makeup supervisor. We have her assistant. And then depending on the show, how many performers there are, they bring in extra makeup artists and hair artists.
Okay, yeah.
So just like the dressers, they're brought in depending on the number. So full time, there's around 30 of us in the costume department. During shows, during Nutcracker, Sleeping Beauty, Midsummer, things with large amounts of children, it can be as high as 45 of us working.
Wow.
Starting at around 8 a.m. and then going until the shows are over. It takes an entire army to get a single tutu on stage.
It does. And I like that you say that, because it really does. It's such a team of people working together to have what that audience is seeing in front of them. And people don't, that's okay. Yeah, and people don't realize that sometimes. I mean, why would they? Why would an audience member, unless they're in the business, know that while they're going to see that finished product on stage, everything that's gone on behind the scenes to get that accomplished, which I just find fascinating. And I applaud all those people.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we're, Mark and I finished our 3rd interview. We've decided what I'm going to be paid, this journey over everything. And right before I say yes, he goes, "So I no longer think you're fit to work in the shop."
Real.
And I'm like, what's going on? What did I say during something that now is going on? He said, "I say this because I've recently learned that our shop manager, well, the person who was supposed to be the next shop manager, has taken a different position because of COVID and everything. And based off of your background, based off of everything you're wanting to do, I want to start a different conversation. How would you like to be the next shop manager of the New York City Ballet?
Wow.
So it
Wow.
goes from me being a stitcher in the shop
Yes.
to managing the shop.
Yeah, you
And
went to your dream.
right.
Right?
So we had a lot of conversations about what that would mean and what these two different trajectories would bring me to in life.
Right.
Because I told him I eventually wanted to be at this position. And
Yeah.
he said, you've already done so many things and you've excelled at them. It's not like you did it, you failed at it, you did something else and failed. You just kept building up higher and higher.
Yeah.
And he said, I know this would be a risky decision because I was 31 at the time. And most people stepping into this level of company at this high of position, you're probably not going to do it till you're around 40 because you need that much real world experience. And he said, while you're only 31 and you've only been sewing at that point for 5 years, and a year and a half of it was COVID, so really 3.5 years experience, you've already done a lot. You also know how to communicate with the orchestra, with stage management, with finances. Because of previous jobs, I had to do all those things, which at the time I didn't know was setting me up for success, but it really was. And so Mark said, how would you like to jump 10 years in your projected career path and start now? While, yes, your technical skills are going to slow down because you're managing the shop, there will be moments that you do have to sew, you do have to help out. So you're going to be learning it, but it's just going to be a slower path versus all these other things that will actually help you better for your future.
Wow.
I think this is the better route. So it turned into more conversations. And after a total of 5 interviews, really five conversations, but technically they were interviews.
Sure.
It was decided that I became the next shop manager of New York City Ballet.
That's amazing. Congratulations. Because I have to say, hearing you explain all that, and what did I was with you for a few hours with the whole group. Number one, it comes across how much you love what you do. And you are so engaged in what you do and detail oriented. And you know things with your eyes closed. You just, and you really do. And your attention to detail and your memory. You have I don't know if people tell you this or know this about yourself. You must. But your memory and your recall is fascinating and amazing. Like you could be mid-sentence about something, you get talking about something else, but then you go right back to where you were, which I think is really great because that shows you, like, if you're working on something, right? Like let's put it to let's transfer that to a skill. You're working in the middle of something. I need something. You go get it. You over here, look at, but then you go right back to where you were and you pick up right where you left off. I think it's fascinating, but I have to say it's so obvious. It was obvious to me how much you love what you do. So thank you for that because,
You're welcome.
yeah.
It's actually, it's funny that you point that out because that's a key skill to managing this specific shop.
Okay.
So we have 10 stitchers in our shop, and these 10 stitchers come from all over the world. Our entire staff come from 9 different countries, and there's approximately 4 to 5 different languages spoken in the shop every day. And so that means the majority of the shop is speaking English as a second or even third, sometimes third language. And I've had to learn how to communicate in their version of broken English.
Yes.
Well, part of it is that. And so it's learning how to break these things apart and jump around in conversations, seeing the sentence in reverse order sometimes. But it's also because of how quickly our stitchers need things and how they communicate. Today, I was at my desk. I had 5 of my own projects laid out in front of me. But then I was working on projects 1 and 2 and 5 at the same time
Yeah.
because they all related to each other.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, one of the stitchers comes up and he goes, one of the machines, the blades have broken again. And while they know how to fix it, it's actually better systematically for me to be the one to stop what I'm doing and go fixing it because they have multiple things they have to be
So they
working
could
on.
continue doing
So
something like hand or
they can
this or
get,
that, right?
yes. So as they're doing that, I can stop paperwork and then I go and I fix the machine. So productivity has not slowed down. So I fix the machine. That takes me anywhere between 5 minutes to sometimes 2 hours, depending on what's happened. And then the second I'm done, I have to go back to what I was doing before.
Yeah.
I'll be 5-10 minutes into it, and then someone else needs something. And then
Yes.
I might end up doing 3 to 4 to 5 other things before I then come back to what I was focusing on.
Yes. That's what happens when you're in that management role so often with anything, and I was struck by something when we were there on the tour was how, at least in this particular day, I don't know how it is on every day, but it was really quiet. Like everybody was so in their zone, and you have to be. Like when I came home, I said that to my husband. I was like, everybody was really, which I thought was great. You have to be like, and it wasn't even like there was music on. I don't even know. There could have been. I didn't even hear music. Like it's just
a little bit,
and it's not like you're hearing like the machine or the. It was just everybody is. You have to be so focused that you're. It was that to me was fascinating to me, but I think very pleasant. Like I said, this is kind of nice to have this quietness. You don't realize it because you're coming from the outside, crazy, noisy city into this very quiet, really quiet, like positive. It's very positive in there too. I felt like a really positive vibe in there, which was really, really nice to feel. So I don't know if you ever wonder that, but I'm telling you, it was very positive.
So I've heard that from all my staff. But then what you just mentioned, one of our newest stitchers, she just finished grad school. She just started working with us. She's, tomorrow will be the end of her second week with us.
Oh, wow.
She's doing great. We love her.
Good.
But after, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 days into working, she came up to me and she said, no one's coming up to say hi to me. No one's talking to me. No one's doing anything with me. I went, yeah, because they're working. And she said that she was just so used to grad school where, one, you're students, you have very different deadlines. You have a whole semester to make one outfit. Versus here we have 3 days to make an outfit. And she's just used to people talking across the room and doing all this stuff. And we do that occasionally. Every so often laughter breaks out. We might all get distracted a little bit because someone did something funny. But then immediately, and we're focused. We're back to sewing, like doing anything. And it's because, one, we're at a job. We're getting paid to be doing this. We're at the top of our industry. There's very few, not only dance companies, but I describe this to people all the time that, in my opinion, our costume shop and the Metropolitan Opera's costume shop in North America are the 2 places that are probably the closest to being true couture houses.
Yes,
because
I agree. Yeah.
Everything is truly made for each individual dancer. And so there's that aspect that my whole staff understand, and they pride themselves on being these makers. But it's also, these are either developing master artisans or are master artisans. One of the other things she pointed out to me that she realized is, making a ballet bodice for her originally, what might take 2 weeks of labor in the school shop and everything, one of the ladies here can make in a day. And while she's very skilled for her age, she's realizing in the grand scheme, she's just barely talented enough to be the beginner in our shop. And it's great that she realized this and she doesn't feel defeated. She knows it's very humbling to be like, okay, I am surrounded by masters in this room. And this is who I want to be one day.
Cream of the crop. You get that when you walk in there. first of all, you're going there and you're going to a cream of the crop
Yes.
place. You know that. So the bar is high to begin with, but I just being in there, there's a level. I'm speaking from my own walking through as a guest with a group, like
Yeah.
I'm not even a tutu maker, and I was so honored to be asked to come along that my friend asked me to come. But you feel you want to, or I wanted to honor and respect the space and honor and respect what's going on, because it is an art form. What you're doing
Yeah.
in the costume shop, like you're saying, these are artisans and master craftsmen, people who are masters at what they do and becoming that, they're
Yeah.
becoming those masters. And that's what's needed. That's what's needed to create what we're seeing out on stage. So I feel it. I feel it when I'm there. I need to see
And
all
you're
the other
always welcome
places.
back.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. I was going to invite myself because just I find it fascinating to see. I love seeing all that and seeing all the ins and outs and but anyway, let's continue with so tell everybody, were you finished with that part of it? Were you
Yeah.
finished with so tell everybody what like your day is like, what a typical day is. And I know it can vary depending on the project,
Yeah.
but just say like you have, let's say for instance, right now, you said you were working on the fall, right? Was it the fall or the winter season? You're getting ready for fall season while the dancers are getting ready to leave for
Go to
Copenhagen.
Copenhagen.
Yes, for the end of their summer season. So you're working on the fall. What's the day
Then,
like for you as the manager?
so right now, as the manager, let's see. It varies a lot, as
Yeah.
we know. But so right now we're still in the early stages. We have I think it's 5 weeks until the fall season opens.
That's all? 5 weeks only?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Sorry.
a long time for us.
It is a long time, but like when to me, like the fall, I'm still like the fall's far away. But then when
Oh
you say
yeah.
5, because a lot can be accomplished in 5 weeks. So much can be done, but
Yeah.
go ahead.
So right now we are working on the new ballet for the fall fashion gala.
Mhm.
And
Nice.
that is a lot of work.
Okay.
It's going to be 15 dancers, 8 men, 7 women. So yeah, 15
Wow.
dancers.
Okay.
And then to do that, we have the designer we're working with, which Mark, because he's the director of costumes, he focuses more on the artistic part. He's working with the designer to get everything functioning and going with that. As that gets finalized, he is working with our men and women's draper to make sure the artistic part is all happening. As they're working on patterns, then I'm working with them to figure out what is the workflow of this going to be.
Got it.
What needs to be done? What is the time frame that we're doing?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
in this part of my day-to-day, I'm really a project manager.
Yep. Okay.
And thinking about every aspect. These dresses we're making for this ballet, the hemline, so the bottom of the outfit. If you were to imagine, like if we were to cut it all open and lay all the panels from end to end,
Yep.
the hem is going to be 17 yards long.
Wow.
So 55 feet.
Wow. Wait,
That
for
is going to be
what?
the circumference for one.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's going to be beautiful.
And they're being ombre'd from either black to white to black or white to black to
Wow.
white. So all that has to be hand dyed. It's going to be made of a lightweight silk chiffon that has to all be pleated. So it
Oh
has to
my
go out to a
goodness.
pleating company. It has to come back. It has to be dyed. It has to be built. The base blouses that will be above the corsets we're also making have to be dyed to match the skin tone of each dancer. And then the structure has to be built on top of that. So I'm having to work with our drapers to figure out what is the timeline. How long is this one going to take? How long is that one going to take? I talked to our stitchers who have been here for almost 30 years going, for you, who is the fastest at doing this, how long will it take you to do our type of hemming on chiffon for 17 yards? And she's going, for me, that will take one entire day. for one. So an
Wow.
entire 7
So,
to 8 hour workday to him one.
wow.
So if she's the fastest, I then have to figure out, okay, what's the slowest person and how long is that going to take? So I estimate 2
Wow.
to 2.5
Yeah.
days for one dress. And that's
Wow.
just to him.
Yeah,
So that's my job right now, being the project manager.
I see.
I'm also having to think about what's happening just day to day in the shop, communication, fixing the machines, ordering parts,
Yeah.
working with our shopper as she orders materials. So she's focusing on that part. I'm focusing on shop supplies. And then we help each other out when we need to. So it's also being a shopper. One of our drapers today told me, okay, Jarod, there's actually going to be a lot of hand embroidery done on this, and you know how to do hand embroidery. So be prepared to clear out your work schedule so that when the corsets are done, you and one or two other stitchers, you're going to be leading that little team to be doing all the hand embroidery. And I'm like, okay,
Wow.
great. So I have to be thinking now weeks ahead I have to get weeks worth of work done advanced so that
Yeah,
I can be clear for an entire week
to do that.
away from my
Wow.
computer. Then it's also, I'm already planning Nutcracker. So I already have outfits that we're rebuilding in the shop. We already know who we're making a new green and pink sugar plum for, a dewdrop, what has to be redone. So I'm working with our assistant draper because as the drapers are working on the new stuff, assistant draper is working on rebuilds. So I'm working with her to plan out, okay, you're going to work on this right now and this right now. Then you need this cut out. Then you have to get this over to the dyer so that it can come back. So like all of these things for Nutcracker, because normally we don't touch Nutcracker till after the fall season is done. But our winter season is going to be massive.
Okay.
2 brand new ballets, and one of them is going to be a world premiere tutu ballet. So
Wow.
tutus
Okay.
take a long
Long
time to make.
time.
So we have to
You
get all of Nutcracker done in advance so that we have basically from mid-October all the way through the beginning of January to just work on these 2 ballets.
Wow. You have to source out to the Tutu Maker Network. I came and visited you. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Wow. That's a lot,
Yeah, it
but
is. So,
exciting.
that's what I'm doing right now. Um,
Wow.
Tomorrow, I already know that part of my day is actually going to be working in the dye room with our dyer because she needs another set of hands. So I can't take people off of sewing stuff, so I'm the one in there. I'm also communicating with the other manager and the 3 supervisors, figure out what they need for their tours and everything, because we have to make everything for the tours. So
Oh
it's a
my
lot
goodness.
of communicating.
Wow. There was several things that I found interesting when we were there, and you mentioned it dyeing to the skin tone, and you had mentioned the blouses. I think you said were that had to be
Yeah,
dyed
the
to the
base
skin
structure
tone,
will be
and you had mentioned, I think, if I remember correctly, about the tights being dyed to the skin
yes.
tone. And so I say this for listeners because this is now what's happening. And it was fascinating because we were in this little dye room. You know, it's a little room. It's not huge, but a lot goes on in there. And Jarod pulled out the sheet of, you know, that everybody's. He didn't show us their names, obviously, but just the different colors, the little subtleties of everybody's skin tone for their tights. That their tights get dyed to match their skin tone, which I find fascinating. So that attention to detail and the attention to detail of dyeing the blouse to match their skin tone is just, you know, it's a detail that only the cream of the crop, I think, would do. I think it's
And
fascinating.
it's amazing that we do this. We started this about 2 years ago. And we initially only did it with a couple ballets to see, is this even going to work? What's the feedback going to be? Will it even look right on stage?
Yeah, yeah.
And what's funny is so for the listeners, so that you know, now at New York City Ballet, the ballet pink tights are no more. They are no longer part of our repertoire. Now, all tights, we buy them as white, and then from there, we dye them to match the skin tone of each individual dancer. And some of the colors have been consolidated. Yesterday, I actually just re-looked at
Wow.
everything,
Okay.
so it's easier for us, for our apprentices to come in. And currently, for all the dancers, men and women, because if we have to make mesh patches or something
Sure.
on a leotard for a men, it has to match. There's roughly 21 colors used to make all the dancers, but we have 120 of them to pick from. And so the way it works for us, I'm going to make it sound simple. This is very complicated. Let's say you're a dancer, you come into the fitting room, we turn off the overhead
I was
lights,
just
and
going
we
to
turn
ask
on
you.
the
Okay.
stage lights. Yeah, so everywhere in the shop, it's all LED lights that are designed to be similar to the color of sunlight. So, but on stage, you're not seeing sunlight, you're seeing very specific colors. So we turn off the overhead lights, we turn on the stage lights that are a lower lumen so we don't burst into flames. And once that light is hitting you, we pull out all the mesh swatches and we match the color of your tights actually to your collarbone area and upper shoulders.
Oh,
With the
okay.
first time we did it, we now know we made the mistake of matching their leg color. The reason why that's a mistake is
Lighter,
because,
no?
well, it depends on the
Oh,
person.
the person. Mine are
We
lighter. Yeah.
And some people are darker. And we've come to learn that most people are a natural ombre of some inconsistency. One leg might actually be lighter than the other leg. Could be darker. Same thing, top to bottom.
Yeah.
And what happened was, when we did it that first time, matching the legs, about half the dancers ended up being almost like a two-tone caricature. So that the top half was their
Oh,
actual skin and the bottom half was lighter or darker.
I
The
see.
other half that actually matched right. Then we looked at photos and videos. We were trying to figure out where we went wrong. Then we realized, oh, well, this is why it doesn't work, because when a dancer is dancing, their blood pressure is increasing. Their blood flow is moving more. Their capillaries are opening up. And so every person, doesn't matter who you are, your skin is going to become more flush and more red because of what's happening.
Right.
And so as we were watching the videos, trying to figure out what to do, we realized, oh, we need to match this area on top. That way you are 100% copacetic the whole way top to bottom. So we had
Wow.
to re-swatch the whole company just to make sure we were right. And now we have everyone in a chart. And then what's great, we do this at near like January, February-ish, or April is when we prefer, because you're in your winter skin color. You're at your
Right.
most pale.
So
And
true.
so from there, that's your base skin tone. Right now during the summer, dancers are out tanning. When they come in, we're dyeing the tights to that color we have on record. Then if they put them on, they realize, oh, I'm darker than this. We can make it darker. We can't
Wow.
make, it's easier to make things darker than it
Darker.
is lighter. So by
Wow.
having this base color, we can always build up from there.
That's a lot of
And
work.
right
I mean, that's a
now,
lot of work.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And each show season, so fall, Nutcracker, winter, spring, and the tours, the dancers get 10 pairs of tights. So roughly 50 pairs for the year.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
if you, during the fall season, only use 4 pair, we're just going to replenish the 4 for your Nutcracker
Well, that
season.
makes sense,
If you
right?
go through 10, we replenish all 10.
10. That makes sense. Yeah.
That way you always have 10 pairs of tights ready to go.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. I mean, it's just fascinating. I was so, it was fascinating to me, and I was so impressed with all those attentions to details that day. That there's just so many different aspects of all of it, that goes into every level of it. Not even, we're not even, this time we've been talking, I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Really,
We'll
we
have to do
really,
a part 2.
you know what? I would love to, Jarod. I really would, because, we could do a little series or something, because I think it's wonderful information, and it's not just like informative, but it's fun information to know. I think it's something that students don't know. Perhaps teachers don't even realize that if they haven't
Even our
danced it.
dancers don't know.
Don't know, and it's what goes into that. Like when I see dancers posting like all the amount of point shoes they go through.
Yeah.
And then when they're smashing them, and I'm like, oh, stop abusing your point shoes. No, but I understand it. But it's just so funny, you get this brand new point shoe that's not cheap. And what they
And you
do,
got to break it and smash it.
cut it and do it to make it, comfortable for their foot. It's just amazing what ballet dancers in particular go through to perform the art form that they're performing. Jarod, I'm serious. We have to have another episode to go through other things. Is there anything before we wrap up? Is there anything that you want to tell the listeners about, and something that hearing you talk about where you started, what you thought your career was going to be, and who knows what your career is going to end up being? What have you learned so far? That you never expected to learn working in the New York City Ballet costume shop.
That's a toughy one without doing one of my long answers. I have learned that's what I'm known for, is giving a very detailed answer.
It's good. I love it. I love it.
What's something I didn't realize that I've learned? Easy answer is communication is so key, but that's something that's across the board everywhere. I think probably the best thing that I have realized, and I realized this very early on, whenever I first stepped foot in this shop, because it is so international. We have people ranging in age from their mid-20s up until 70 years old. And we have at least one person in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Wow.
6 different decades of people. To be a good manager for this type of group of people, and for them also to come from 9 different countries, and even within America, every corner of it, people are going to come up to you and ask a lot of different questions, especially if they want to trust you. And what I learned early on was I taught my staff to differentiate, are you asking Jarod or are you asking the shop manager a question? Because depending on that question, especially because they're union and the director of costumes and the shop manager are non-union. We are full staff members of the company.
Got it.
They are union members who are staff members here, but it's there's sometimes conflicts of interest. And I'll tell them sometimes, they'll ask me a very tough question, and I'll say, okay, as the shop manager, because of my job, because of your union contract, this is the answer I have to give you. But Jarod, the person sitting in front of you who has been in your shoes, know that this is the answer I want to give.
Yeah, see that?
But because of what we're doing, I have to do this. And it's just as hard for me to tell you this as it is for you to hear this. And I hate being this way. And the first couple times I did that, they're like, this is really weird. But now they really understand, okay, if Jarod is saying this, it's because he has to do it. Or I hate being the bad guy to a rule enforcing and everything. Like, I love rules, especially like in board games, but it's for our job. There's a reason why that rule was set up. And if you've only worked here for a couple years and you've never been in a managerial position, you might not understand why I have to do what I'm doing. And so by adding that human level to the answer, they go, okay, like, you are even having a hard time with this. And it makes them appreciate me as their manager so much more, because it also lets them feel trusted that they can be human with me. That when they make a mistake, I'm not going to yell at them. I'm not going to rip them a new one. I'm going to come up, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to tell you I'm upset. But then we're going to find an answer.
See,
because
that's what makes you a good
finding
manager.
That solution. Thank you. We're all getting paid to do our job, but we're so much more than what that paycheck is in the job description.
Yes, well said. And I do mean that. I think that's why you're good at your job. Jarod, this has been a great conversation. Really, I'm so delighted that you were able to join me, and we're going to schedule another recording so we can do a part 2. Everyone, stay tuned.
And then maybe a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6.
A little series, because I think it's important to have, to explain and put out there. But I thank you so much for joining me on Dance Talk. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on Dance Talk. This is Joanne Carey for Dance Talk with Joanne Carey with Jarod Lewis, the costume manager of New York City Ballet. So follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you, everybody.
Powered by Riverside.